There's a moment most people never talk about, not because it's rare, but because it's uncomfortable to admit. A woman is intelligent, rational, and self-aware. She's experienced enough to know when something shouldn't matter anymore. And still, one man stays in her mind, like a song she didn't choose, but keeps playing anyway. Not because he's the most impressive, not because he's flawless, and not because he's performing for attention. It begins when her body starts linking him to a specific internal experience, a sense of calm, a quiet charge of energy, focus, relief, and a strange feeling of familiarity, even when the connection is new. This is what people casually call addiction. Not the dramatic kind, the subtle kind. The kind that shows up when her hand reaches for her phone without thought. The kind that makes absence feel louder than it should. This is the first thing to understand. Women don't become attached to men the way men are taught to believe, through status, appearance, or surface traits. They become attached to the emotional environment a man creates, and the contrast that appears when he's no longer there. Some men leave behind nothing more than a memory. Others leave behind a state. And once that happens, the bond has already begun. Most people think attraction is a decision. I like him. I don't like him. I should move on. But deep attraction doesn't work that way. It's closer to scent than to logic, closer to gravity than to preference. A woman can tell herself she's finished and still feel pulled back because her nervous system doesn't respond to reasoning. It responds to patterns. The men women get addicted to usually trigger one of two reactions. Regulation. Her thoughts slow down around him. Her body relaxes. Tension softens. Activation. Her emotions sharpen. Her attention narrows. Desire intensifies. Most men create one or the other. The rare men create both, not through chaos, but through balance. He feels steady, yet quietly dangerous, not violent, not toxic, just unpredictable in the right places and stable where it matters. And that combination is psychologically potent because it generates a message she never needs to say out loud. This man could hold me and still remain himself. And when that feeling appears, attraction stops being a choice. It becomes a response. Here's the uncomfortable truth. What a woman falls for is rarely the man himself. It's the way she experiences herself in his presence. Around some men, she feels like she's performing. Around others, she feels like she can finally exhale. And around some men, she feels observed. Around others, she feels understood without being analyzed. And then there's a third type, the most dangerous type, the man who makes her feel seen, but never fully certain she owns her place in his world. That tension matters because certainty creates comfort, but too much of it can dull desire. And uncertainty can create obsession, but without safety, it turns into anxiety. The addictive bond forms only when uncertainty is held inside safety, not through games, not through disappearing acts, and not through manipulation. just a man who is fully present when he's present and genuinely occupied when he's not. And that creates a clean psychological loop. Her mind begins to fill the silence with meaning, and meaning, once formed, becomes attachment. When women become deeply attached to a man, it usually traces back to 3 quiet markers, not external, not obvious, but subtle. First, emotional contrast. She feels one way with most people, and differently with him. Less noise, more intensity, and more clarity. Second, voluntary investment. She chooses to reach out. She chooses to explain herself. She chooses to return. And once she invests, her mind begins to protect that investment, because humans instinctively defend what they choose. Third, non-neediness. Not arrogance, not coldness, just the absence of begging energy. He isn't trying to extract a reaction from her. He isn't forcing moments. He isn't leaning forward emotionally, hoping to be chosen. He's stable enough to let the moment breathe, and that breathing space becomes addictive because it's rare. Most modern interactions carry pressure, and most men apply it without realizing. But a man who brings no pressure becomes a mirror, and mirrors are difficult to forget. People often assume women become attached to men who make them feel safe. That's true, but it's incomplete. Women don't bond deeply with men who feel safe because they are weak. They bond with men who feel safe because they have shape, and boundaries create shape. A man without boundaries doesn't feel safe. He feels unstable, because if he can be bent by anything, he can't hold anything. The men women get addicted to don't win by controlling women. They win by controlling themselves. They don't rush to resolve tension. They don't collapse when emotions rise, and they don't trade their identity for peace. And that steadiness sends a signal that lands beneath words. This man isn't trying to keep me. He's trying to stay true. That's what creates the deeper form of attachment, because it generates respect without being demanded. And when respect and emotion combine, the bond becomes heavy. One of the most underestimated forces in human attraction is presence. Not charm, not confidence, not humor, but presence. Most men are physically there, but mentally elsewhere. They're tracking how they're being perceived, monitoring reactions, and planning the next move. So even when they're listening, they aren't fully with her. The men women get addicted to feel different. When they're present, they're fully present. Their attention doesn't flicker, and their energy doesn't rush ahead of the moment. They're comfortable with pauses. They don't fill silence out of anxiety. They don't try to steer every interaction toward an outcome. And that does something subtle to a woman's nervous system. It slows her down. It draws her into the moment. It makes her feel unusually grounded and unusually aware. That feeling begins to associate itself with him. So, when she's away from him, her mind remembers the contrast. The noise returns, the tension returns, and her body remembers exactly where it felt quieter. Excitement gets a lot of credit in attraction, but excitement alone doesn't create attachment. It creates spikes, highs followed by crashes. Stability, on the other hand, creates something deeper. The men women get addicted to aren't emotionally flat. They're emotionally steady. They don't swing with praise or collapse under challenge. They don't become warmer when validated or colder when tested. And that steadiness communicates something primal. This man can hold pressure. And pressure always arrives. In life, in relationships, in uncertainty. A woman may enjoy chaos for a moment, but she can't settle into chaos. When a man stays grounded while emotions move around him, he becomes a reference point, not a controller, a stabilizer. And stabilizers are remembered long after excitement fades. Attachment doesn't deepen when a man gives more. It deepens when she does. This is one of the most misunderstood dynamics in attraction. The men women get addicted to don't rush investment out of women. They don't pressure it, and they don't demand it. They simply create an environment where investment happens naturally. And over time, that investment begins to show itself in small, almost unnoticeable ways. She reaches out first, not because she has to, but because she wants to. She explains herself, not out of defensiveness, but because she cares how she's understood. And she returns, not because she's chasing, but because something unfinished draws her back. And once she invests, something psychological locks in. The mind protects what it invests in, so the bond strengthens not through manipulation, but through voluntary emotional participation. The man didn't do anything dramatic. He simply didn't interrupt the process. Nothing dissolves this bond faster than emotional neediness. Not expressed need, hidden need. The kind that appears quietly, over-explaining, subtle reassurance seeking, shifting identity to maintain harmony, and changing tone to preserve approval. Women feel this long before they can put words to it, because neediness changes the emotional weight of the connection. Suddenly, she's holding the center, and she's regulating him. And when a woman becomes the emotional anchor, she can't fully relax into attachment. The men women get addicted to don't ask women to stabilize them, because they arrive already stable. They don't make her responsible for their confidence. They don't rely on her reactions to feel whole. And that independence doesn't create distance. It creates gravity. Because attachment doesn't grow toward need. It grows toward strength that doesn't beg. So, what kind of man produces this effect without forcing it? Not a performer, not a strategist, and not a manipulator. A man who is internally settled. He knows what matters to him, moves at his own pace, and doesn't rush emotional outcomes or cling to roles and expectations. He can enjoy connection without chasing permanence, offer warmth without surrendering shape, and walk away without bitterness. And because of that, his presence carries weight. Women don't become attached to him because he tries to be unforgettable. They become attached because he is consistent in mood, boundaries, attention, and self-respect. He feels like someone who could stay and someone who could leave without either option collapsing him. And that's the paradox. The men women get addicted to aren't trying to bind women to them. They're simply men whose inner state makes attachment feel natural and absence feel noticeable, not loud, not dramatic, just quietly undeniable.